Hi, my name is Bruno Sade from brunosade.com, and today I want to talk about the important issue of how to stay tuned in while we are tapping. As we know, for tapping to work at its best, it's important that we are focused on that which we are tapping on and not get distracted. Regardless of the words that I might be using when I'm tapping, if I'm saying those words mechanically or I'm getting distracted by something else, and the mind has a tendency to become distracted, then chances are that the tapping is not going to be quite as effective. So I found that the idea of dropping into our body when we are tapping can be particularly useful. First of all, let me clarify that I wouldn't necessarily recommend this approach when working on a traumatic memory, but when working on a recent memory or even a future made-up event or scenario. If there's anything that, for whatever reason, you are finding it a bit challenging to stay focused on that while you are tapping, or the mind can get distracted with different thoughts or different things, I find it particularly useful while I'm tapping to place some of my attention on wherever in my body I might be feeling that which I'm tapping on. So, for example, let's say that I want to work on a certain specific event or a specific mental image. Basically, with EFT, what we want to make sure is that we are focusing on something specific, which sometimes can be a specific memory, a specific mental image, a specific phrase or thought. And while we are focusing on that, whatever specific thing we are focusing on, to ask ourselves, where in my body am I feeling that? And it's usually somewhere in this line, like it might be the throat, might be the eyes or the face, it might be the chest, it might be the belly. That's usually the most common locations where we might feel that. And this might not work for everyone, but I find it particularly useful personally when I'm tapping on myself, while I'm tapping, to simultaneously place some of my attention on a certain mental image, a mental image that for whatever reason might be somewhat triggering for me. So for example, let's say that the example I always give in these videos, and let's say that I have a fear of public speaking and I'm imagining a presentation I might have to do at work in front of my boss and my other coworkers. And so let's say I want to tap on this future made-up event. As I think about this event, maybe there's an image that comes up, for example, the image of my mind going blank and everyone is staring at me. So that's the mental image. And asking myself the question, when I think about that image, what do I notice in my body? Or where in my body do I feel that triggering image? And, sometimes it can be subtle, but maybe it's something like in my throat. Personally, I find that, at least in my case, trying to put that sensation into words, trying to describe it or label it, doesn't work very well for me. It makes me go into my head. It makes me start intellectualizing or rationalizing, and therefore it moves me away from what I'm feeling, which is where EFT is most effective, when we can stay in our feeling spaces, so to speak. So if while I'm tapping, I'm simultaneously placing some of my attention on this image of trying to give this presentation at work and everyone is staring at me and my mind goes blank, and at the same time I'm placing some of my attention on this sensation in my throat, and I don't even know, is it a constriction, is it a tightness, tension, I don't know. I simply focus on feeling it. So feeling the sensation in my body and also placing my attention on this image. So while I'm tapping, I'm simultaneously focusing on both. And I find that, at least in my case, that helps my mind stay focused and tuned in to what I'm feeling. And that's usually when I start yawning, which is a sign of release that EFT is working. So basically, this is a tip that can be useful. As I've discussed in previous videos and articles, EFT, when we think about like the optimal arousal zone or the optimal activation zone when it comes to EFT, we want to make sure that that which we are focusing on is neither too hot nor too cold. So too hot would be something that the emotional intensity is too high and too overwhelming. And in that case, sometimes we might not want to drop into our bodies because it's intense enough as it is. So sometimes using some gentle or distancing techniques might be more appropriate. But in those cases where we might lean towards this is too cold, in other words, this is not activating my feelings enough, it's not activating the unpleasant reaction that I want to address with tapping enough. In those cases, it can be useful while we are tapping and saying whatever words we are saying, or maybe we are tapping silently, to keep that focus in place of the physical sensation and maybe a mental image or a phrase or a thought about the specific event that we are tapping on. So I hope this was useful to you, and I look forward to seeing you again in my next videos.